Hello, I'm doing a book review, and the book I want to review is The Gunslinger by Stephen King. Now, The Gunslinger was first published in serialized form. It was actually published in 5 parts in the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction between the years 1978 and 1981. Then in 1982, all 5 parts were published as one novel. Now, The Gunslinger is also the first book of Stephen King's fantasy series, The Dark Tower. Now, the Dark Tower series is an 8-part series of fantasy novels. However, the actual story for the series ended in book 7, which was titled The Dark Tower. However, in 2012, Stephen King published an 8th Dark Tower novel titled The Wind Through the Keyhole, which was set between the events of books 4 and 5 of this series. Now, Stephen King often calls the Dark Tower series his magnum opus or his masterpiece, which I could definitely understand why he considers the Dark Tower series to be his best work, because the Dark Tower series as a whole is definitely his most ambitious work. Now, the series was primarily inspired by a poem by Robert Browning titled Child Roland to the Dark Tower Came. Stephen King also drew a lot of inspiration from Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. Also, the main character of this series, Roland Deschain, was heavily inspired by Clint Eastwood's character from Sergio Leone's Dollars trilogy. Now, the plot of The Gunslinger is it's set in an alternate universe known as Midworld. Now, Midworld, the best way I can describe this world is, think the Middle Ages crossed over with the American Old West. Like, technologically, this world is very similar to how our world was in the 1800s, or at least how America was at that time, but politically and socially, it's very similar to medieval times. You also get the heavy implication that this world, thousands of years prior to the events of this story, used to be a lot like our world. And magic also exists in this world as well. Like, this world has wizards and fairies and demons and other supernatural creatures. Now, the story follows a man named Roland, who is the last gunslinger. Now, in this world, gunslingers were basically like knights in a way. As I said, this world is almost like the American Old West crossed over with the Middle Ages. So, in this world, gunslingers were almost like this elite group of peacekeepers, but something happened years prior to the events of this story that wiped out all the gunslingers with the exception of Roland. And in the story, Roland is pursuing this evil sorcerer called the Man in Black because he needs the Man in Black to take him to what's known as the Dark Tower. Now, what the Dark Tower is, you find out more at the end of the story and in the subsequent sequels that would follow this novel. Now, in the book, during Roland's pursuit of the Man in Black, he eventually runs into this young boy named Jake Chambers. Now, Jake is actually basically an alien to Roland's world. It turns out that Jake is actually from our world. Jake was this 12-year-old boy, or I think he was like 11 or 12. He was this young boy who lived in New York City, and something happened to him, which I won't give away, where he basically became reborn into Midworld, so he's completely alien to Roland's world. So in the book, Roland has to defend this young boy named Jake from demons and other supernatural creatures that inhabit his world. And that's the basic plotline of The Gunslinger. Now, The Gunslinger is a really good book. Now, I'll admit, when I first read this book, I actually didn't like it too much, and I can't really put my finger on why I didn't like it. I guess because it was set completely in this alternate universe. There's a lot of stuff that I really didn't understand, but I just recently reread the book, and having read the rest of the series, I picked up on a lot more stuff in this book, reading it a second time, so I can definitely say reading it again, I definitely enjoy the book a lot more, and I can honestly say that it is a really good book. However, I will still say it's probably my least favorite in the whole series, and I do think the series gets better after this book. Now, in this story, the character of Roland Desjane really does go through a real arc, both in this book and in the sequels that would follow this book. Really, throughout the whole series, he goes through a genuine character arc. Like, in the beginning of this story, Roland is a very cold, emotionless person, but you find out in flashbacks that there is a reason he's the way he is. Like, he pretty much lost everyone he was ever close to, but when he meets this boy Jake, the two of them start to develop almost like a father-son kind of relationship. It doesn't start out like that at first, but it soon develops into that, both in this book and in the other books in this series, and Roland finds somebody to care about other than his pursuit of the Man in Black and his pursuit of the Dark Tower. Now, one thing that I thought was really cool about this book, and it's something that I've always liked about the Dark Tower series as a whole, is the series kind of deals with the concept of other dimensions. Like, at the end of this book, Roland finds out that his world and the world that Jake is from are just part of a long chain of parallel universes, a multiverse, essentially, and the book deals a lot with the concept of parallel universes and other dimensions, which I always thought was a pretty interesting concept. Now, as I said before, this book is the first book of Stephen King's Dark Tower series. Now, as the series went on, you found out that pretty much all of Stephen King's books tie into the Dark Tower series in some way, shape, or form. Now, a lot of his books only have, like, minor connections to the Dark Tower series, but some of his books share major links with the Dark Tower series. Now, among his books that share major links with this series would be his books like It, The Stand, Salem's Lot, The Eyes of the Dragon, Insomnia, The Mist, and Hearts in Atlantis. Now, the main villain of this book, the Man in Black, or Walter O'Dim, you find out later on in the series is actually Randall Flagg from Stephen King's novel The Stand, and the connection between The Stand and the Dark Tower series is officially explained in the fourth Dark Tower novel, Wizard and Glass. Now, I've already done reviews on this series before on this YouTube channel, but I took my old reviews of the Dark Tower series down because I'm currently rereading the whole series, and I'm going to put up re-reviews of each of the books throughout the year. I'm not going to do them all at once, so I'm going to do other book reviews in between my reviews of the Dark Tower novels. So, I'm currently in the process of re-reviewing this entire series. Now, the Dark Tower series also spawned a series of Marvel comics which started out almost like prequels to the series, but they soon kind of developed into their own thing, and right now you actually have a line of comic books from Marvel which are based on the Dark Tower novels. Now, this summer they're going to be coming out with a film adaptation of the Dark Tower series. Now, I'm both excited for this movie, but also really skeptical on this movie as well. Now, I have seen that leaked trailer that leaked online a few months ago, and it seems like this movie, like, it does not appear that this movie is going to be based on any particular book in the series. Rather, it seems like this is going to be an original story that's simply taken plot elements from different books in the series, which, to be fair, could work, My issue with this, though, is the Dark Tower series has a lot of really complex and interesting ideas throughout the whole series, and my worry is that they're going to throw so much into one movie that the story for the movie is going to end up being kind of incoherent. Like, that's my biggest worry with this new Dark Tower movie. Now, Idris Elba is going to be playing Roland in this new Dark Tower movie. Now, I think Idris Elba is a fantastic actor, but I'm really not sure if I see him as Roland, though. But we're gonna have to wait and see how he does in this new Dark Tower movie. I mean, even though I don't really see him as Roland, he's still a great actor, so at least I know Roland's going to be at least well acted in this new Dark Tower movie. Now, one thing about this new Dark Tower movie that I am really excited for is Matthew McConaughey, who is going to be playing Randall Flagg in this movie. That I'm really excited to see how it turns out, because McConaughey is a fantastic actor, and he actually does do a really good job at playing villains, so it's going to be really cool to see him play the character of Randall Flagg, and even if the movie sucks, it's still going to be really cool to see him as this character. And if you actually listen to interviews with McConaughey about this movie, he actually does have a really interesting take on the character, so I am really excited to see him take on the role of Randall Flagg, or Walter. Now, one thing that I'm interested to see if they do, I doubt they're gonna do this, but they're also coming out with a new adaptation of Stephen King's It, and the book It actually did tie in with the Dark Tower series, so I'm interested to see if this new adaptation of It is going to tie in any way with this new Dark Tower movie. I doubt it, but at the same time that would be really cool though. So yeah, that's my review on The Gunslinger by Stephen King, and bye.